This is the story of a single watch movement that powered the most prestigious chronographs of the 20th century, went to the moon with the Omega Speedmaster, and quietly saved an entire industry from extinction. The Lemania 2310. You have probably never heard that name, but if you have ever admired a Patek Philippe chronograph, marveled at a Vacheron Constantin, coveted a Breguet, or dreamed of owning the legendary moonwatch, the Omega Speedmaster that landed on the lunar surface, you have already encountered its work. Every single one of the Holy Trinity brands built their reputations in part on this one extraordinary caliber. Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin, and even Audemars Piguet, through family connections, all relied on it. And almost nobody talks about it, despite this movement rivaling even the famous Zenith El Primero in historical significance. Let's fix that. The story begins in 1884 in the Vallée de Joux, when Alfred Lugrin founded a small workshop specializing in chronographs and repeaters. Lugrin had trained at Jaeger-LeCoultre, just down the road in Le Sentier. He was brilliant, and his movements won gold medals in Milan and Bern. The company he built eventually became Lemania, officially registered in 1906. That factory in Lorient still stands today as Manufacture Breguet, and the street bears his name, Rue Alfred Lugrin. But the real magic happened decades later, in the early 1940s, when Lemania and Omega joined forces on a project they called the 27 CHRO C12. The goal was ambitious: build a 27mm chronograph movement with a 12-hour register. Leading the project was Albert Gustave Piguet, Lemania's technical director, whose family tree reads like a who's who of Swiss horology. His grandfather co-founded Piguet Frères. His father served as vice director at LeCoultre and later director of Zenith. And here is a detail collectors love. Albert Piguet's distant cousin was Edward Auguste Piguet, co-founder of Audemars Piguet. In 1942, Piguet and his colleague Jacques Raymond delivered their masterpiece. At 27mm in diameter and just 6.74mm in height, the Lemania 2310 became the world's smallest chronograph movement, beating existing competition by a full 2mm. It featured a column wheel, horizontal clutch, swan neck regulator, and roughly 48 hours of power reserve. The finishing was exquisite: perlage on the main plate, Côte de Genève on the bridges, and precise anglage on every edge. By every measure, it was a technical leap forward. Omega adopted it immediately, calling it the Caliber 321, and for the next 2 decades, this movement would quietly build one of the most legendary legacies in watchmaking history. In 1957, Omega placed the Caliber 321 inside its new Speedmaster. In 1965, astronaut Ed White strapped a Speedmaster reference 105.003 to his wrist and performed the first American spacewalk during the Gemini 4 mission. Then, on July 20, 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, the Omega Speedmaster ST 105.012, with a Caliber 321 beating inside, became the first watch on the moon. A movement born in a Swiss Valley workshop had traveled 250,000 miles into space. But here's where the story gets truly fascinating. In 1968, Omega replaced the Caliber 321 with the cheaper, cam-switched Caliber 861. The column wheel chronograph fell out of fashion across the industry. Then the quartz crisis hit and nearly wiped out mechanical watchmaking altogether. By the early 1980s, almost every manual wind, column wheel chronograph movement had vanished from production. Almost every one. The Lemania 2310 survived. It was the only manual wind column wheel chronograph still being manufactured in a Bausch form. When the Swiss watch industry began clawing its way back, when brands realized that mechanical complexity was the antidote to quartz disposability, they all turned to the same source. Patek Philippe came calling first. In 1985, they introduced the reference 3970, their perpetual calendar chronograph, powered by what Patek called the CH2770, their decorated version of the Lemania 2310. Then, in 1994, they went further. Introducing the reference 5004, a split-seconds perpetual calendar chronograph, one of the most complicated wristwatches in serial production. For collectors, this became a true grail watch. Philippe Stern later explained the challenge. The Lemania 2310 was never designed to be a split-seconds chronograph, and the pinion stack for all those hands pushed the limits of what was physically possible. The slightest mistake could bend the pinion, and every time the split-seconds function engaged, it created what watchmakers call rattrapante drag. Patek's solution was an ingenious isolator mechanism, nicknamed the octopus for its multi-armed shape. The 5004 was produced until 2010, across 5 materials. White gold is believed to be the rarest, with only 26 examples known. At auction today, a 5004 commands nearly 1 million Swiss francs. Vacheron Constantin arrived in 1989, adopting the 21-jewel Lemania 2320 variant and renaming it the Caliber 1140, later refining it into the 1141 and then the 1142. They added their own signature touch, a Maltese cross at the center of the column wheel. Today, Vacheron still produces the 1142 in-house for pieces like the Historiques Cornet de Vache. Breguet, having acquired Lemania outright in 1992, called their version the Caliber 533. When the Swatch Group absorbed Breguet in 1999, they gained control of Lemania entirely and locked the door behind them. Lemania stopped selling eBay to outside brands. The golden age of shared access was over. Then there's Roger Dubuis. The man himself had spent 2 decades at Patek Philippe working on complicated timepieces and 9 years before that at Longines repairing chronographs. When he launched his own brand in 1995, naturally, he turned to the movement he knew best. His homage chronographs used what he designated RD56, limited to just 28 pieces per variant, a number chosen at the suggestion of an Asian collector who considered 8 a lucky number. When Richemont acquired Roger Dubuis in 2008, they gained the intellectual property rights to manufacture Lemania movements, which is precisely how Vacheron Constantin continues producing theirs today. And you can actually tell these movements apart just by looking at them. Each brand sculpted the intermediate bridge into its own distinctive shape. Patek Philippe's is a clean V, Vacheron Constantin's falls somewhere between a V and a Y. Roger Dubuis went full wishbone. Omega's Caliber 321 has a U-shaped bridge. Breguet sits between a U and a Y. Same architecture, different artistic signatures. Speaking of Omega, in 2019, they did something remarkable. Using a covert team codenamed Alaska 11, the same designation used for secret NASA Speedmaster projects in the 60s and the 70s, they spent 2 years reverse engineering the original Caliber 321. They performed a slice-by-slice 3-dimensional tomographic scan of the movement found inside astronaut Gene Cernan's actual Speedmaster, the one he wore to the moon. That scan alone cost over 1 million Swiss francs. The result is a faithful recreation now available in a stainless steel Speedmaster priced at $14,100. The legacy continues evolving. In 2025, manufacturer Fleury introduced the FM04, a new movement clearly derived from the 2310 movement's architecture, but updated with a larger diameter, higher frequency, and a 65-hour power reserve. Meanwhile, modern competitors like A. Lang and Sonodatograph have raised the bar for contemporary chronographs, but they still pay homage to the fundamental innovations pioneered by Piguet's original design. The blueprint endures. So why did every major brand turn to this one movement? 3 reasons. It was robust and reliable. Its compact 27mm diameter fit virtually any case. Its slim profile allowed brands to stack additional complications on top without creating wrist-busting thickness. The Lemania 2310 did not just power watches, it powered an entire industry's resurrection. At a time when the mechanical watch faced extinction, this single movement, born from Albert Piguet's mind in a Valley workshop in 1942, gave the greatest names in horology the tool they needed to prove that craftsmanship still mattered. It went to the moon. It beat inside million-dollar Pateks. It carries a Maltese cross inside Vacherons being made today. Not bad for a movement most people have never heard of.